So just to follow up from the previous mixing video, guys, it's such a tricky thing because I think a lot of people are going to get mad at me for not making this as hard as the rest of the world presents it. And it's just because it's not, guys. I'm not misleading you or trying to make it simpler than it is. Quite the contrary. I'm just making it what it is. The rest of the world is on this mission of like obsession and ADD and like hyper obsession and more plugins and more plugins. Guys, if you have span and utility and a basic EQ, where's the EQ8? I mean, to start off with, you're good with this. This is going to show you where everything's sitting in the mix, which is invaluable. This will be great to make things wider and thinner, if you will, or like mono and stereo, if you will, in the mix, which is a lot more valuable than people give it credit for. And a lot of people don't mess with that. And that's a shame because it's a plugin that gets forgotten about a lot. And the power of it is something that I feel so strongly about that I would say that over compression or that over reverb even. For dance music at least. And EQ, really, as long as you do this, basically, I mean, not on your kick and your bass line, obviously, or your sub bass line, and probably even your low mid bass line, if you have one of those in your track or have a need for it. That, and then maybe, just to make sure there's no high-end craziness, and it is dance music, so for the most part, it's going to be on a high-end loud sound system, so you don't need to be taking the highs over here and doing crazy shit like that. You're going to kill somebody with that loudness. I might even see how much you could cheat the high end on certain sounds to maximize frequency masking or lack thereof, and to maximize where energy in the mix is sitting, because similar to over in the low end, the more you can get rid of, really in a way, the more you can cheat your master and get a louder master. That's a very broad strokes way of putting it, but it's, big picture wise, it's true. Now, if you were going to buy something, guys, for mixing, like I said, I'd probably go for Ozone first. Even though it's not a mixing plugin, it can do so much for both mastering and mixing. It's unreal. And if you have the CPU power, you could get rid of all three of these plugins and use Ozone instead. But I think every time you use an Ozone, meaning on every single track, so your bass lines, your hi-hat, your snare, your clap, your kick, your lead sound, your vocal, it's just going to become a lot. And your CPU, wow, my CPU is running kind of hot right now. I wonder why that is going to get messed up and wacko. So, but like I said in the previous video, Ozone 9 is good, and really any Ozone probably from here on out is great because they have low-end focus, which really helps you separate. It can help you separate along with dynamic EQ as well. If you need separation in the bass region, which is usually like the most imperative thing for dance music, is making sure that your kick is not muddied by your bass line so that it sounds great on a loud sound system, club system. The low-end focus is a great mixing tool and a great mastering tool, so you're getting a 2-for-1. And then dynamic EQ is also a great mixing tool as a 2-for-1 on that. So dynamic EQ basically is like a mixture of an equalizer and a sidechain compressor. So every time the kick, just as a quick and dirty example, every time the kick hits or sounds, the bass line in the region of where we at here, 77 hertz, dips down. And as the kick goes away, the EQ recovers. And as the kick hits again, the EQ dips down. And as the kick goes away, the EQ recovers. And as the kick comes back in, the EQ dips down. It's dipping the bass line out of the way of the kick. And then when the kick goes away, the bass line comes back up. So it's basically a 2-for-1. It's an EQ as well as a sidechain compressor all in one. So pretty great. EQ obviously, dynamic, so compressor obviously. Exciter, I haven't really found a real big need for an exciter per se, other than for a little bit of coloration if you want to give it some warmth, which I usually just save that for mastering, to be honest. I don't usually put too much warmth on my individual tracks. It's just not necessary. I mean, I understand that like it's fun to decorate the cake, but I had fun doing that for about 8 years, and then I realized I wasn't really being productive doing that. I had fun, but then 3 hours would go by and I have no music to show for it. And my friends are like, dude, you said you were a producer. Why aren't you producing music? Well, because I messed around with an exciter for 3 hours and didn't really get anywhere. Imager, great for making things wider in the stereo field. So your highs, your mid highs, your mid lows, and your lows. Usually your lows obviously are monoed out. And then your mid highs usually aren't too wide. This is where the real wide stuff can be messed with, is your mid highs and definitely your highs. These are not exact numbers, by the way. This is just me having fun for a minute. And then of course your maximizer, which is your limiter. So this is a lot of bang for your buck. As I've gone over in the advanced production course, if you do have some money to spend, Neutron is a more mixing focused version of Ozone. So if Ozone is for mastering, which it is, Neutron is for mixing. Great stuff in here, real similar to what I just went over. They've got a mixing assistant. So it's an AI, I don't know what the correct terminology would be for it, but it's artificial intelligence module, if you will, that will analyze your favorite tracks and help you get your tracks as close to your reference track as possible. Pretty freaking epic. Similar to Ozone, and even to a degree a lot better, because this is for mixing, is the dynamic EQ inside of Neutron. It'll do whatever you want, but it'll show you where there's EQ masking. So what that means is when there's two elements sitting on top of each other and competing for space, it'll show you where those problems are, and then upon showing you where those problems are, you can use the dynamic EQ function in here to dip different areas as they hit. So when your when your kick hits from 100 hertz back, your sub bass line will dip down. And as your kick goes away, your sub bass line comes back. And as your kick hits, the sub bass line dips down and gets out of its way. And as the kick goes away, the bass line recovers and sounds and has space to sound, to be heard, if you will. So Neutron is great if you have a little extra cash to spend. But yeah, I mean, you don't need to really worry about a whole lot of mixing plugins and mastering plugins and bundles and this and that. You just don't need to, guys. I mean, it all really starts with your volume faders. First and foremost, before you put any of this shit on your channels, on your master or individual channels, look at what's going on in your mix. If your bass is up here and it gradually goes downwards like that, you're off to a good start. Probably one of the best mixing tools I can tell you as well is a reference track. Drag a reference track in, and I won't play it because I don't want to get any kind of copyright issues. But sure, why not? This will work. I switch these out pretty often, but so basically, drag in a reference track, right? And shut that reference track off. So basically, when you're playing your stuff, your track is playing. But when you hit solo, only your reference track plays. And when you unsolo, because your reference track is turned off, your tracks play. So when you solo, the reference track will play. When you unsolo, because your reference track is turned off, you won't hear it anymore. You'll just hear your stuff. Go back and forth listening to your reference versus what you have and look at span. What does the reference track look like? Which, let's see, if I kill the volume, will it come up? Well, is it on master? It won't come up. Let's see if it'll come up if we drag and drop it onto the... Oh, pardon me. We need to go like this. I messed that up. Sorry, guys. No, it won't show. It won't show. But that's okay. Oh, maybe it does show. Cool. Okay. So look at what your reference track looks like, especially at the drop, compared to what your track looks like. And if your track looks similar to what your reference track looks like, and you're happy with your reference track and you want to sound like your reference track, well then, by golly, you're onto something there, guys. That doesn't take a ton of plugins. You'll get closer to your reference track by just messing with the volume faders inside of Ableton and comparing and contrasting what you just adjusted, and as a result what that looks like on the spectrograph versus what your reference looks like on the spectrograph. That's where you'll find your success. And like I said, from there, EQ to clear out the unnecessary bass in tracks that have no business in the bass region. Compression, maybe, probably not. Reverb, a little bit. Not necessary though, probably won't miss it that much. Utility plugin to make things stereo, to make things wider, to make things more in mono, yeah. Yep, that with an EQ, yeah. More so than compression and reverb, definitely. Something to spice it up a little, delay or echo. Something to give you a little ping pong effect or a little depth in the mix, yeah. I just find that goes a lot better with current EDM than reverb. So that's a crash course on mixing. That combined with what I've talked about in the advanced music production course as well as my other production courses, including the 30-day power production course. Don't forget about that one just because that's the intro course. There's a ton of gold in that course. That's really all you need, guys. I don't mean to make it less than it is. Like I said in the beginning of this video, it just is what it is. I'm making it what it is. I'm telling you what it is. I'm not making it more than it is to try to upsell you on plugins. It's just not as hard as people make it seem, and it's not as mythical as people make it seem. I'll see you guys in the next video.